You may not realize it, but the way you enter a room, how you breathe, how you hold yourself, how your eyes observe the world, these quiet signals tell more of your beauty than your reflection in the mirror ever could. In the stillness of your being, others feel their own longing for peace. That is beauty. And sometimes, especially as we grow older, what makes you good looking is not what you show. It is what you no longer need to prove. A younger woman may turn heads with her appearance, but an older woman who has mastered her energy, she turns hearts. This is not about physical attraction alone. It is about presence, and presence is cultivated, not inherited. There are moments in life when a woman walks into a room and, without speaking a single word, everyone turns. Yet it is not because she is loud, nor because she is dressed in anything particularly attention-seeking. There is something else, something you cannot define by color, weight, or age. It is presence, and presence is not taught in beauty magazines or manufactured in a clinic. It is felt. It is what makes people sit up a little straighter. It is what causes a man, regardless of how distracted he may be, to pause. Not just because he sees something pleasing to the eye, but because something within him senses a frequency he has not encountered in a while. This is the kind of beauty that begins where the mirror ends. The first sign that a woman is good looking in her older years, whether she recognizes it or not, is the energy she carries. Not the kind of energy that screams for validation, but the quiet kind that settles a room. This is not about youth, but resonance. People may not remember the details of your face, but they will remember how they felt in your presence. If they felt safer, more grounded, more seen, that is beauty in its most enduring form. In neuroscience, we often speak of the limbic system, the emotional brain that connects us without language. What is fascinating is that this part of the brain does not respond to reason, but to rhythm. It reacts to energy, emotional tone, facial expression, intonation, the way someone breathes near you. These signals are subtle but powerful. A woman who has developed internal harmony will transmit this without even realizing it. Her nervous system speaks to others on a level beyond words. In Eastern philosophy, there is a similar understanding. A woman's inner chi, her life force, is shaped by the quality of her thoughts, the stillness of her emotions, the steadiness of her breath. And over time, these inner movements form a kind of aura. It is not mystical. It is tangible. You can feel it. Have you ever met someone whose smile made you feel nourished, even if they said nothing, or someone whose mere presence settled the chaos within you? That is key. That is energetic beauty. This is why some women in their 60s or 70s are more captivating than others in their 20s. Not because they've tried harder to preserve their looks, but because they've cultivated their energy. They've refined what they allow into their emotional space. They've learned not to react to every trigger, not to entertain every conflict, not to invest in every passing judgment. There is a lightness in their step and a softness in their gaze that says, I have learned, I have let go, and I am here. People crave this energy, not because it entertains, but because it heals. In relationship dynamics, this quality becomes even more important. Emotional energy, especially in long-term partnerships, often carries more weight than appearance. A man may initially be attracted to what he sees, but he stays because of what he feels. Does he feel calm in your presence or tension? Does he feel admired or judged, uplifted or depleted? These are not always spoken aloud, but they register deeply. One woman told the story of how, after years of dating without much success, she decided to stop focusing on how she looked and started focusing on how she felt. She took daily walks in silence. She stopped engaging in gossip. She practiced deeper breathing. She journaled about her pain and forgave people who had hurt her. She started enjoying her own company, and slowly something shifted. She didn't look drastically different, but people began to treat her differently. They complimented her glow. They told her she seemed more present. It wasn't that the world had changed. It was that her energy had become clear. The truth is, we live in a world that overvalues how things appear and undervalues how things feel. But as we age, we begin to notice something. Appearances fade, but frequency stays. If a woman feels grounded in her skin, if her soul is no longer fighting itself, if her breath flows without tension, she becomes magnetically attractive without trying. She does not need to dominate a room to fill it with her light. Even the way she holds silence speaks. That silence is cultivated over years of choosing peace over drama. It is the silence of someone who no longer needs to prove, compete, or chase. And ironically, that is what draws people in. There is a saying in the East, to those who have inner light, the whole world becomes drawn to them. Inner light does not mean perfection. It means alignment. A woman whose actions, words, thoughts, and values begin to move in the same direction becomes coherent. And coherence is powerful. When she laughs, you believe it. When she listens, you feel heard. When she speaks, there is no urgency, no fear behind her voice, only truth. That's when others begin to ask, what's her secret? But it isn't a secret, it is discipline. A daily return to herself. It is choosing what to entertain, what to let pass, and what to nourish. This leads to the second and deeply connected sign of beauty in older women's emotional stability. Now, emotional stability is not the absence of feeling. It is not indifference or detachment. It is the strength to feel deeply, without losing your center. And this is incredibly attractive, because it is rare. In modern society, many people confuse passion with chaos. They assume emotional outbursts are signs of depth. But real emotional depth is not how loudly you speak your pain. It is how wisely you hold it. A woman who has become emotionally stable doesn't numb her emotions. She integrates them. She feels disappointment, but she doesn't drown in it. She feels anger, but she doesn't erupt. She allows emotions to visit, but not to live permanently in her home. This quality changes everything, especially in relationships. In psychology, we know that one of the most attractive traits in a partner is emotional regulation. When a person can remain calm in conflict, when they can listen without reacting defensively, when they can respond instead of explode, the relationship becomes a space of growth instead of warfare. For a woman, developing emotional stability over the years is not just a skill, it is a mark of deep beauty, because the people around her begin to associate her with safety. And in a world full of volatility, people crave safety. A man may think he wants excitement, but he stays with the woman who brings him peace. Emotional stability also changes the way a woman sees herself. She is no longer driven by insecurity. She doesn't scroll through social media comparing wrinkles. She doesn't chase compliments or fear rejection. She knows that her worth is not on trial, and that quiet confidence transforms her posture, her eyes, her words. She is not just attractive, she is trustworthy. There's a woman I once met who had been through a painful divorce. For years, she carried resentment and regret. But slowly, she began to process the emotions rather than suppress them. She took up Tai Chi. She started therapy. She practiced mindfulness. And one day, she said something profound. I still remember the pain, but it doesn't move me the same way. I've learned to sit with it, like an old friend who sometimes visits, but no longer overstays. This is emotional mastery. It is the art of noticing your waves without being swept away by them. And when a woman reaches this point, her beauty evolves into something far more powerful than appearance. It becomes presence. It becomes wisdom. Even in the small things, this shows. When someone interrupts her, she doesn't rush to defend. When someone criticizes her, she doesn't crumble. She listens. She reflects, and then she responds from choice, not compulsion. This space between stimulus and response is where her power lies. From a physiological standpoint, this also has profound effects. Emotional stability calms the nervous system. When the nervous system is calm, the body ages more gracefully. Cortisol levels drop, sleep improves, digestion improves, even skin quality benefits. The face softens when the soul is not clenched in reactivity. So yes, emotional peace becomes physical beauty, and over time, people begin to notice. Not necessarily because of flawless skin, but because of the feeling they get when you are near. They don't quite know how to name it. They may say you seem radiant, or that there's something about you that feels different. But what they are sensing is that you are not burdened by your own emotions. You have become the calm in the storm, not the storm itself. This creates a different rhythm in your relationships. Instead of chasing, you attract. Instead of clinging, you connect. Instead of trying to be understood, you begin to understand. And that understanding deepens your beauty. A woman once asked, "How do I know if I am beautiful now that I am older?" The answer is simple. What happens to others in your presence? Do they feel safer? Do they feel seen? Do they feel inspired to grow? If so, your beauty is doing more than shine. It is healing. True emotional beauty is not loud. It is not desperate. It is centered, spacious, and compassionate. And the woman who carries this becomes not just someone to look at, but someone to learn from. She becomes a teacher without a classroom, a muse without needing to perform, a mirror that shows others what is possible when you stop chasing love and start becoming it. She is not admired because she demands attention. She is admired because she no longer needs it. And in that space of self-contained wholeness, she becomes magnetic, without trying, without effort, just by being. And that, no matter what the world says, is the most good-looking quality a woman can carry into her later years. There is something deeply captivating about a woman who knows who she is. Not because she's the loudest in the room, not because she's the most decorated or externally validated, but because there's an unmistakable stillness within her. It is as if she carries her home inside her, unshaken by the winds of opinion, untouched by the need to prove anything to anyone. That is the kind of confidence that doesn't scream, but whispers powerfully. A woman like this doesn't seek approval. She sees herself. She recognizes her worth without needing to display it. She lives in her own rhythm, and that rhythm commands respect. Confidence, when rooted in self-knowledge, transcends the temporary nature of physical beauty. It doesn't fluctuate with the approval of others or disappear with age. It deepens. It evolves. And this evolution makes a woman profoundly attractive, especially in her later years. She may not fit society's narrow standard of beauty, but when she speaks, people listen. When she walks into a room, others feel her presence before they notice her appearance. This is not surface confidence, the kind that is fragile and dependent on praise. This is the kind that comes from years of looking inward, questioning, healing, refining. It is spiritual posture, an alignment between who she is and how she shows up in the world. In relationships, this quality shifts everything. A woman who knows herself does not fall into roles she did not choose. She is not a performer. She is not molded by the hopes or fears of others. She does not compromise her truth to fit into someone else's narrative. Instead, she brings herself fully, honestly, completely. And because of this, she offers her partner something invaluable: authenticity. That authenticity builds trust. And trust, more than chemistry or charm, is the foundation of deep connection. There's a kind of beauty that blossoms in the space where a woman stops asking, Am I enough for them? And begins asking, are they aligned with who I truly am? That shift is subtle, but life-altering. It signals the end of self-abandonment and the beginning of genuine self-respect. From that point onward, she no longer approaches relationships from a place of deficiency, but from overflow. She no longer seeks to be completed by another because she has made peace with her own wholeness. One woman in her 50s shared how, after decades of placing her worth in her relationships, she began a journey inward. It started with small changes, spending time alone without feeling lonely, setting boundaries without guilt, saying no without apology. She began to listen to her intuition, the quiet inner voice that she had silenced for years. Slowly, she stopped molding herself to fit the expectations of others. And with each step, she noticed something remarkable. The more she returned to her authentic self, the more radiant she felt. People around her noticed too. Not because she changed her style or lost weight, but because her presence had shifted. She was no longer afraid to be seen as she truly was. That was the transformation. Confidence rooted in self. Knowledge is not built in a day. It is the result of facing your pain and no longer allowing it to define you. It is looking at the parts of yourself that once made you ashamed and choosing to embrace them with compassion. It is forgiving yourself for the years you lived small and then walking forward with clarity. This process takes time. It takes discipline, but the reward is a kind of peace that cannot be bought or borrowed, and this peace is deeply attractive. In psychology, there is something called secure attachment. It describes a person who feels safe in themselves and therefore creates safety in their relationships. These individuals do not chase love, nor do they run from it. They approach it with openness and strength. A confident woman with secure self-knowledge brings this kind of energy. She does not overreact when someone pulls away, nor does she become dependent when someone gets close. She holds her center. And from this center, she loves, not out of need, but from freedom. This freedom creates space in a relationship. Space for the other person to be honest. Space for growth. Space for real intimacy to develop. Because when one person in the relationship is anchored, the relationship has a better chance of weathering the inevitable storms of life. This is also why confidence becomes more refined with age. The older woman has usually experienced enough disappointments to no longer confuse rejection with inadequacy. She understands that not all endings are failures. Some are redirections, some are necessary, and she's learned that protecting her peace is more important than pleasing everyone. There's a profound dignity in a woman who knows she doesn't need to entertain what doesn't nourish her. She doesn't waste energy proving her worth to people who are not equipped to see it. She simply steps away with grace, with kindness, with quiet certainty, and the world watches in awe because there is strength in knowing when to stay, but even greater strength in knowing when to walk away. In Eastern thought, this kind of self-knowing is considered a high form of wisdom. The phrase often used is wu wei, translated loosely as effortless action. It means the kind of movement that comes from alignment rather than struggle. A confident woman doesn't force outcomes. She aligns her actions with her values, and from that place, her life flows. She does not chase opportunity. It finds her. Not because she is lucky, but because her energy is clear. People want to work with her, be near her, learn from her, not because she sells herself, but because she is herself. And this includes romantic relationships. It is often said that a woman who is confident in herself becomes intimidating to those who are not ready. But in truth, she is not intimidating. She is simply unshakable. Those who fear her are often those who have not yet faced their own insecurities. A man who has done the inner work will not find her intimidating. He will find her inspiring. Because her confidence invites honesty, her self-awareness calls others to a higher standard, and her boundaries create safety for real love to grow. Confidence, when rooted in self-knowledge, also affects how a woman carries her body. Her posture changes, her pace changes. There's no frantic rush to keep up, no desperation to impress. She walks slowly, but with direction. She speaks with pause, but with clarity. Even her gestures are mindful. She is not trying to be anyone else, and that authenticity makes her unforgettable. From a physiological perspective, this state of self-assured calm also regulates the body. Confidence activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. This state supports digestion, sleep, skin health, and emotional resilience. When a woman feels safe in herself, her body softens, her shoulders drop, her face relaxes. She glows, not from cosmetics, but from coherence. A woman once shared how she spent most of her 20s and 30s pretending. Pretending to be confident, pretending to be happy, pretending to be enough. But every night, she felt the ache of misalignment. She wanted to be loved for who she truly was, but she hadn't yet shown that version to anyone, not even herself. It wasn't until she began sitting quietly, reflecting deeply, and reconnecting with her forgotten passions that something changed. She picked up old hobbies. She reconnected with her faith. She forgave herself. And one day, she said, "I stopped pretending, and the people who truly saw me never left." That was the day she began to live. There is a difference between a woman who enters a room hoping to be noticed and one who enters knowing she belongs. The former seeks approval. The latter brings it with her. The former performs. The latter offers presence. And in that offering, others find permission to drop their own masks. That is the silent power of true confidence. This kind of woman doesn't need to compete. She doesn't gossip. She doesn't diminish other women to feel better about herself. Her self-worth is not built on being the most admired or the most praised. It is built on alignment with truth, and truth does not fluctuate with trends. It is timeless. In the realm of romantic relationships, this becomes especially potent. Because she does not try to be chosen, she chooses. She does not beg for affection. She extends love consciously, without fear. She does not manipulate with silence or need validation through constant reassurance. She communicates clearly. She gives space, and she holds space. This emotional maturity becomes a sanctuary for any man who is ready to meet her there. She also knows the value of solitude. Not the lonely kind, but the sacred kind. The kind that allows her to recharge, to reflect, to realign. In solitude, she does not feel abandoned. She feels at home. And this inner home is what she brings to every connection, romantic or otherwise. It is not a house of pain, but of peace. And when a woman lives from this place, she redefines beauty. She teaches others not through words, but through presence. That beauty is not in being seen, but in being known, and knowing oneself so deeply that no one else's perception can disturb the truth. She no longer needs the mirror to remind her who she is. She has become the mirror, reflecting the highest in herself and inviting others to do the same. She is not afraid to age because she is not clinging to what is fading. She is anchored in what is eternal. And those around her, they feel it, they see it, even if they can't explain it. They just know this woman is not here to impress. She is here to live and to love from her center. A woman who is truly radiant often carries with her something invisible yet unmistakable emotional discipline. It is not loud. It doesn't need to be. Like the roots of a tree holding firm beneath the soil, emotional discipline stabilizes her in moments when others might react, lose control, or fall into the same patterns of dysfunction. She has learned, often through pain, and repeated disappointment, that mastering her emotions is not the same as suppressing them. Instead, it means responding with clarity rather than reacting from chaos. This type of inner mastery is not always praised in the world we live in. We are often encouraged to speak without pause, to vent our frustrations instantly, and to call it authenticity. But real authenticity arises not from unfiltered emotion, but from conscious awareness. It is the difference between screaming in anger and calmly asserting a boundary. One may feel powerful in the moment, but the other creates true change. And a good-looking older woman, one who radiates strength and grace, has often chosen the latter again and again until it became her way of being. Her emotional maturity becomes visible in how she handles disagreement. In the heat of a difficult conversation, she does not raise her voice to prove her point. She doesn't seek to win. She listens, not to reply, but to understand. She observes, not to judge, but to discern what is truly happening beneath the surface. And when she speaks, her words are intentional. They do not wound, even when they are firm. They guide, even when they challenge. This is the mark of someone who has done the inner work to master herself first, before attempting to influence others. In romantic relationships, this emotional discipline becomes transformative. A younger version of herself may have panicked when someone didn't call back right away. She may have sent long emotional texts, over-explaining her worth or over-analyzing what went wrong. But now, she knows how to pause. She knows how to breathe through the discomfort of uncertainty. She understands that time reveals truth and that desperation only clouds clarity. This wisdom frees her. It gives her the space to observe rather than chase, to choose rather than beg. Consider a woman named Alina, who after 2 failed marriages, found herself single in her mid-50s. When a new man entered her life, charming, attentive, seemingly aligned, she felt the old habits trying to rise, the urge to merge too quickly, the hope that he might be the one. But this time, something was different. She didn't fall headfirst. She walked slowly. She observed his actions over his promises. When conflict appeared, she didn't escalate. She paused. She asked herself, am I being triggered? Or is this a real red flag? And most importantly, she reminded herself that her peace was not something she would trade for temporary affection. That decision, born from emotional discipline, saved her months, perhaps years, of heartache, and it led her to a deeper sense of self-respect than any relationship ever had. Emotional discipline is also seen in how a woman handles her own inner storms. Everyone has moments of doubt, insecurity, or fear, but instead of being ruled by them, she knows how to sit with them. She has rituals, walking in silence, journaling before reacting, meditating when the world feels heavy. These practices aren't trendy habits, they are sacred tools. They help her maintain equilibrium, and this equilibrium is what makes her presence so powerful. She becomes a safe space for others, not because she absorbs their chaos, but because she doesn't allow their chaos to disrupt her center. From the perspective of neuroscience, this type of regulation engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making and empathy. It quiets the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and aggression. In other words, emotional discipline isn't just spiritual, it's biological. A woman who cultivates stillness rewires her brain to favor calm over conflict, understanding over outburst, and that neural wiring becomes visible in her relationships. Her partner feels safer, her friendships deepen, and her decisions become more aligned. There is a wisdom story from the East about a woman who carried a bowl of water on her head as she walked through a busy village. Her task was to deliver the water without spilling a single drop. Children ran past her, merchants shouted, carts rattled, but she walked steadily. When someone asked her how she managed to stay so focused, she replied, "Because I know what I carry is too precious to waste." That is what emotional discipline looks like. A woman knows that her peace is too precious to waste on drama. Her dignity is too valuable to be spilled in moments of thoughtless reaction. So she walks carefully, not out of fear, but out of reverence for what she carries within. And people feel this. They may not be able to name it, but they feel the difference between someone who is emotionally scattered and someone who is emotionally sovereign. Sovereignty is attractive. It is magnetic. It's not about having all the answers or never feeling upset. It's about how quickly you return to your center when life tries to pull you off course. In a romantic relationship, this looks like the ability to communicate honestly without collapsing. When her partner disappoints her, she doesn't immediately spiral into assumptions or accusations. She expresses her feelings, yes, but she does it from a place of strength. She might say, "This hurt me, and I want to understand what happened," rather than, "You always do this. I can't trust you." One response invites connection, the other builds a wall. Emotional discipline chooses connection without sacrificing truth. It also allows her to let go of what no longer serves her, not from bitterness, but from clarity. She can love someone deeply and still walk away if the relationship no longer aligns with her values. She understands that staying in a relationship out of fear is not loyalty. It's self-abandonment. And she will not abandon herself anymore. She has outgrown that pattern. A woman once told a story of how she ended a relationship with a man she still loved because she saw that he wasn't willing to grow. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She simply said, "I care about you deeply, but I can't continue to participate in something that shrinks me." He didn't understand it at the time, but years later, he reached out and said, "That moment taught me more than anything else in my life." Her emotional discipline had become a lesson for both of them. From a relationship guidance perspective, this kind of self-control shifts dynamics. Emotional reactivity creates cycles of tension, blame, and withdrawal. Emotional maturity, however, creates space for healthy repair. She learns how to disagree without devaluing. She learns how to feel hurt without inflicting hurt. And this becomes the environment in which real love can grow. Not the fantasy kind, but the kind that endures. Even in friendships, emotional discipline is a gift. She does not gossip. She does not betray confidences. She does not insert herself where she is not needed. When someone is struggling, she listens without rushing to fix. When someone succeeds, she celebrates without envy. Her emotional landscape is balanced, and so others trust her. They lean into her presence because it feels safe, not because she is passive, but because she is principled. And all of this becomes visible, subtly, in her face, in her eyes, in her energy. A woman who does not carry bitterness has a softer gaze. A woman who does not live in reaction carries less tension in her jaw. A woman who is no longer trying to control everything walks with lighter steps. This is not just beauty. It is health radiating from within. One woman in her 60s said, "I may have more wrinkles now, but I've never felt more beautiful. Because I'm not afraid to feel anymore. I just don't let my feelings drive my life." That wisdom is rare, and it shines through in everything she does. In relationships, this allows for joy. Not forced joy, but real moments of laughter, playfulness, and shared ease. Because she is not waiting for her partner to manage her emotions. The connection is freed from the weight of codependency. She can love deeply without losing herself. She can stay open without becoming vulnerable to harm. Because her emotional discipline includes discernment. She has learned how to trust and how to verify, how to forgive and how to protect herself. how to open her heart, and when to walk away. This emotional sovereignty also allows her to mother wisely if she has children. She does not project her wounds onto them. She teaches them through modeling, not preaching. They watch her regulate her emotions, and they learn that it is possible to be powerful and gentle at the same time. They watch her choose peace over drama, and they learn that peace is not weakness. It is strength under control. There is a concept in ancient traditions that says, "As within, so without." When a woman cultivates stillness inside, her external world begins to mirror that serenity. Her relationships become more respectful. Her home becomes more calm. Her choices become more intentional. And this doesn't mean that life becomes perfect, but it does mean that chaos loses its grip on her. She no longer lives on the edge of her emotions. She lives at the center of her awareness. A woman like this changes the energy of a room simply by entering it. Not because she demands attention, but because her very presence reminds others of what is possible. She is not here to be admired, though she often is. She is here to live with integrity, and in doing so, she invites others to rise. Not to meet her standards, but to remember their own. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence includes the capacity to feel fully, express honestly, and choose wisely. It means honoring your feelings without being ruled by them. It means loving someone enough to stay and loving yourself enough to leave when necessary. It means recognizing that your peace is not a luxury. It is your responsibility. When a woman reaches this level of emotional clarity, she becomes profoundly beautiful, not in a way that demands validation, but in a way that inspires others to seek their own alignment. Because true beauty is not in how much you're admired, but in how deeply you know yourself. And a woman who lives from this place, calm, conscious, emotionally grounded, doesn't just look good for her age. She becomes timeless. What gives a woman her true radiance in the later stages of her life isn't simply the way she dresses or speaks. It's how she carries the invisible architecture of boundaries within her. There is a grace that emerges from a woman who no longer apologizes for her standards, a dignity that forms in silence when she learns to honor what she will and will not tolerate. Her beauty becomes less about being pleasing to others and more about being aligned with herself. She walks differently, not because she is trying to be noticed, but because her soul has made peace with not being available to everything and everyone. In her younger years, she might have tried to accommodate, tried to please, smiled when something felt wrong, said yes when her body whispered no. And yet, as the seasons changed and the lessons deepened, she began to realize that the absence of boundaries wasn't kindness. It was a silent erosion of self. It was the slow disappearance of joy beneath the weight of people pleasing. She woke up one day and decided, I'm not available for that anymore. This internal shift, this reclaiming of personal space and emotional sovereignty, becomes one of the most attractive energies a woman can carry, because it isn't defensive. It doesn't seek to control others. It simply radiates the quiet, unmistakable message, I know my worth. I protect my peace. I'm no longer negotiating with chaos. And it shows not just in her posture or voice, but in her choices. She no longer entertains relationships that leave her questioning her value. She no longer explains herself repeatedly to people committed to misunderstanding her. She no longer participates in emotional games that demand her to shrink in order to be loved. This type of clarity, this level of self-respect, requires deep inner work, and it creates a presence that is calm, strong, and incredibly magnetic. In romantic relationships, her boundaries don't repel intimacy. They refine it. A man who is emotionally awake will feel more drawn to her because her boundaries are not walls, They are invitations to depth. She is not withholding. She is aware. She doesn't give access based on charm or chemistry alone. She pays attention to consistency, character, and alignment. And in doing so, she teaches others how to treat her, not through lectures, but through how she lives. There's a story of a woman in her 50s named Mira. After leaving a long marriage that had turned emotionally cold, she found herself re-entering the dating world. At first, she feared that her standards were too high, that her boundaries might scare people off. But as she stayed true to her inner compass, she began to notice something interesting. The wrong people left quickly, yes, but the right ones respected her more. They didn't mind that she didn't respond to late night texts. They valued that she made time with intention. And eventually, she met a man who didn't just admire her strength, he rose to meet it. Because her boundaries were not threats, they were thresholds to something real. Boundaries also reshape the way she relates to herself. When she sets limits externally, she becomes more spacious internally. She sleeps better, she worries less. She doesn't carry the emotional debt of resentment or exhaustion because she no longer gives from a place of depletion. She gives from overflow. And that overflow becomes a blessing to everyone around her. It's the difference between offering love freely and leaking energy out of obligation. In terms of psychology, healthy boundaries are essential for emotional regulation and well-being. According to research on interpersonal dynamics, individuals with clearly defined boundaries experience less stress, greater satisfaction in relationships, and a stronger sense of identity. It's no surprise, then, that a woman with good boundaries often looks younger, not only because of her lifestyle choices, but because her nervous system isn't in constant overdrive trying to manage chaos. From the Eastern perspective, boundaries are not barriers, they are energy containers. Just as rivers flow best when they are held by banks, human energy flows best when it is channeled with intention. A woman with boundaries understands where her energy goes. She doesn't give her time to people who drain her. She doesn't let her mind be hijacked by every opinion. She practices energetic hygiene, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. She knows that her presence is sacred, and she no longer wastes it in spaces that diminish her. And there is something striking about this level of inner clarity. When a woman walks into a room with her boundaries intact, people may not know why, but they feel it. They don't speak to her any kind of way. They don't assume she'll be available on demand. Her energy commands a certain level of respect, not by force, but by frequency. She has stopped chasing validation. And in that stopping, she has become deeply attractive. A woman who owns her boundaries has also made peace with not being liked by everyone. This is one of the most liberating transitions she undergoes. She no longer sacrifices her peace to maintain false harmony. She doesn't engage in emotional gymnastics to be accepted. She has released the exhausting need to explain herself in spaces that don't offer mutual understanding. Instead, she cultivates environments that mirror her truth. This means she is selective, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. She values quality over quantity. She may have fewer friends, but deeper ones. She may have fewer lovers, but more meaningful connections. She no longer keeps people in her life just because of history. She understands that time does not equal loyalty, and that love without respect is not love at all. So she lets go, and every time she releases what no longer serves her, she creates space for what truly does. Consider the case of a woman named Lena, who had a lifelong pattern of being the fixer in every relationship. Family members called her when they were in trouble. Friends leaned on her endlessly. Even romantic partners began to treat her as a source of emotional labor, not as a partner. But something shifted when Lena began therapy and internal reflection. She realized that her constant availability was not love. It was fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being rejected. And when she began to say no, softly but firmly, something powerful happened. At first, there was resistance. People pushed back. Some even left. But over time, a new ecosystem formed around her. One of mutual respect. One of real reciprocity. And Lena felt, for the first time, free. This is what boundaries do. They filter. Not only in who we allow in, but in what we allow to grow. And a woman who understands this becomes a master gardener of her own life. She pulls out the weeds of old patterns. She waters only what aligns with her vision. She no longer waits for permission to prune what's out of place. Because she has become both the gatekeeper and the guardian of her soul. Boundaries are not just spoken, they are lived. They show up in how a woman takes care of her body. She no longer tolerates poor treatment from herself. She eats not to punish or restrict, but to nourish. She moves not to shrink, but to celebrate her form. She speaks to herself not with cruelty, but with compassion. Her inner voice becomes a sanctuary, not a battlefield. And this shift affects her posture, her breath, even her skin. Peace becomes visible. In relationships, this creates a foundation of mutual empowerment. A man who truly sees her isn't threatened by her boundaries. He is drawn to them because he knows that what she offers is not dependency. It is conscious love. And conscious love is built not on neediness, but on sovereignty. She does not need someone to complete her. She wants someone who complements her growth. That difference changes everything. In family dynamics, her boundaries create healing. She no longer plays roles that don't serve her. She stops being the silent martyr or the unappreciated giver. Instead, she models emotional responsibility. She teaches through presence. And slowly, others either rise or move. But either way, her path clears. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But when the soul is ready, the boundaries appear. This reflects the sacred timing of growth. A woman does not wake up one day with perfect boundaries. She stumbles. She experiments. She sometimes overcorrects. But eventually, she learns to listen to the wisdom of her discomfort. She learns that tension is information, that her body knows when something is off, and she begins to honor those whispers. This level of self-trust is not taught in school. It is earned in the quiet hours of self-reflection. It is cultivated in those moments where she chooses herself, not from selfishness, but from deep self-awareness. And the more she chooses herself, the more others learn how to love her properly. Boundaries also require discernment. Not everything that feels good is good. Not everyone who enters with flowers comes with honorable intent. A woman with good boundaries doesn't just ask, do they like me? She asks, do they respect me? Do they add peace or confusion? Do I feel expanded or contracted around them? And she listens, not only with her ears, but with her intuition. Because her boundary is not just a fence. It is a tuning fork. It helps her sense the truth beyond appearances. This awareness grows more refined with age. And with it, her energy becomes sharper. She is no longer nice in the way society defines it. She is kind, yes, but also clear. Compassionate, but not codependent. Giving, but not leaking. She no longer seeks approval as a substitute for connection. She knows who she is. And that knowledge has set her free. Her presence becomes a quiet revolution. In a world that teaches women to be palatable, she becomes powerful. In a world that teaches women to stay small, she expands, not to dominate, but to fully occupy the space that was always hers. And that, in essence, is beauty that cannot be bought. It cannot be faked. It is not born of creams or surgeries or the praise of others. It is born of fire, of having walked through years of self-forgetting and coming back home. of having chosen peace over performance, of having said again and again, "This is who I am, and I am no longer afraid to live it." When a woman arrives at this place, her boundaries are no longer something she explains. They are something she lives. And in living them, she invites others to do the same, not through pressure, but through presence, not through demand, but through demonstration. And in that silent, sacred strength, her true beauty shines, effortlessly, undeniably, and with a light that only grows brighter with time. True beauty in a woman, especially in the later seasons of her life, is not revealed in the brightness of her youth, but in the stillness of her presence. There's something undeniably magnetic about a woman who no longer rushes to prove her worth, who no longer competes, compares, or seeks constant reassurance. Her glow is not loud, but quietly persistent, and it arises not from how she looks, but from how she is, calm, centered, and fully embodied. This quality cannot be manufactured, for it is cultivated in the hidden places, in silence, in stillness, in deep self-reflection. There is a kind of aging that doesn't diminish a woman, it dignifies her. Because over time, she has stopped running. Not just physically, but mentally. She no longer runs from solitude, from the discomfort of her own thoughts, or from the reality of her emotions. She is no longer afraid of being alone. And this acceptance of stillness, this comfort in her own energy, becomes one of her most captivating features. Imagine a woman sitting alone at a cafe, not scrolling, not performing for the room, not waiting to be noticed. She is simply there, fully present with her tea and the quiet hum of life around her. People glance, not because she's doing anything special, but because she is not trying. Her presence invites the eye not with noise, but with peace. This is the power of emotional stillness. This is what gives a woman that rare and beautiful energy of she knows something the world has forgotten. In a society addicted to movement, speed, and constant stimulation, a woman who has made peace with silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to others their own unrest. And because she doesn't need anything from anyone to feel complete in that moment, she becomes deeply attractive. Not in a performative way, but in a soul-stirring way. People may not even understand why they are drawn to her, but something about her frequency feels like home. From the lens of neuroscience, this state of calm presence correlates with a well-regulated nervous system. When the parasympathetic system is activated, when the mind is at ease and the body is no longer in fight or flight, the brain operates from coherence rather than chaos. This inner order is felt energetically by others. Just like children sense safety in the presence of someone who is grounded, adults are unconsciously drawn to those who radiate stillness. It's not a loud vibration, but a deep one. It doesn't shout, it hums. Psychologically, a woman who is emotionally still is often a woman who has processed her wounds. She doesn't project her pain onto others. She doesn't need to dominate conversations, overshare, or oversell. Her self-worth is no longer conditional. She's not performing for love. She is love in its most undemanding form. And that, ironically, is what makes people crave being around her. There's a story of a woman named Farah who had once been the life of every room she walked into. Charming, loud, full of jokes and sparkle. But after a personal loss and a few years of spiritual solitude, she returned to her social world changed. She was quieter now, more discerning with her words, less eager to be at the center. At first, some friends thought something was wrong, but in time, they came to understand. Farah hadn't become less, she had become more rooted, more real. The noise had fallen away, and what remained was essence. She wasn't trying to be impressive anymore. She was simply being, and in that being, she was unforgettable. This stillness also affects how a woman moves through relationships. She no longer clings or chases. She understands that desperation distorts perception, that when you are in constant motion, grasping for connection, you miss the depth of what's already there. Or worse, you attract chaos. But a woman who is inwardly still knows how to wait. She knows how to pause. She does not rush into intimacy. She allows it to unfold, to reveal its depth over time. Because her calm heart is no longer impatient. This doesn't mean she's cold or indifferent. Quite the opposite. Her stillness gives her the space to feel more deeply, not less. She has the capacity to hold another person's truth without judgment or urgency. She listens, not just with her ears, but with her whole presence. And in doing so, she becomes emotionally safe, a rare and precious experience in today's hyper-reactive world. One of the marks of emotional maturity is the ability to pause before responding, to hold space for your emotions without acting them out. And a woman who has practiced stillness knows how to do this. When someone upsets her, she doesn't retaliate with sharp words or cold silence. She takes a breath. She checks in with herself. She chooses her response. This is not weakness. This is discipline. And it commands a different kind of respect. In intimate relationships, this presence is transformative. Many men, especially those who are emotionally unhealed, are used to women who over-explain, who emotionally pursue, who collapse their boundaries to keep the peace. But a still woman doesn't do that. She does not fight for attention. She does not beg for affection. She observes. She names what she sees calmly. And if alignment isn't present, she doesn't try to force it. She simply steps back. Her silence is not a weapon. It is clarity. And that clarity either awakens the man to rise or reveals that he was never truly present to begin with. There is a kind of intimacy that grows in silence. Not in the silence of disconnection, but in the silence of knowing. When two people can sit together without the need to fill space with words. When their energies can rest in one another. When the conversation deepens without speaking. This is sacred. And only a woman who has made peace with her own stillness can create this space. From a physiological perspective, her glow isn't just emotional. It's visible. Studies in mind, body medicine show that regular mindfulness practices, breathing, meditation, contemplation, reduce inflammation, balance hormones, and improve skin tone. A woman who carries calmness within doesn't just feel younger. She often looks it. Her face is not etched with stress. Her eyes are not darting with anxiety. Her movements are fluid, unhurried. She walks in rhythm with herself. But emotional stillness isn't something she stumbles into. It's earned. It's built from seasons of grief, of letting go, of sitting in discomfort without numbing. It comes from facing the inner noise and making peace with what she finds there. It comes from no longer trying to outrun the parts of herself that once scared her. And in that self-acceptance, she finds silence, not as emptiness, but as fullness, as enough. There is a quote that says, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." In many ways, a woman who has cultivated stillness becomes fluent in this language. She doesn't react to every external opinion. She doesn't explain every choice. She doesn't fear the unknown, because she knows where her center is. She knows how to return to it. And in that, she becomes unshakable. There's a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that peace is more precious than attention. That being grounded is more powerful than being popular. That resting in her own presence is more nourishing than any external validation. And from that moment forward, everything changes. Her standards shift, her energy shifts, her world rearranges itself around the frequency she now emits. This doesn't mean she isolates herself. In fact, she may be more social than ever, but with intention. She no longer entertains chaos for company. She no longer keeps people around out of guilt or nostalgia. Her time is sacred. Her space is curated. Her conversations are layered with meaning, because her stillness has taught her the value of depth. Even in conflict, her approach is different. She does not seek to win arguments. She seeks understanding. And if understanding isn't possible, she seeks peace. She would rather lose the argument than lose herself. And because of this, she becomes a force. Not through domination, but through presence. In spiritual traditions, especially in Eastern philosophy, the still point is considered the center of power. It's the place from which all clarity and wisdom arise. And a woman who has returned to her inner still point operates from this center. She no longer reacts from trauma or ego. She responds from truth. And that truth doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be defended. It simply is. There's a profound beauty in a woman who can walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. Who can say no without guilt. Who can say yes without fear. Who can sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. This level of emotional sovereignty makes her glow. It makes her rare. And in a world that often asks women to perform, she dares to be real. Even in motherhood, her stillness changes things. Children don't need perfect mothers. They need present ones. A mother who can sit with her child's emotions without trying to fix them immediately. A woman who can model calm in the storm. Who shows that power isn't in volume, but in consistency. And this calm presence becomes a legacy, passed down in energy, not just words. Stillness also sharpens intuition. When a woman is no longer distracted by external noise, she hears the whispers of her soul more clearly. She knows when something feels off, even if she can't explain it. She senses truth beyond appearances. She moves with inner direction, not just external logic. And this inner compass rarely leads her wrong. This is what makes her decisions powerful. Not because she always knows the outcome, but because she trusts the process. She doesn't need guarantees. She needs resonance. And once something resonates deeply, she moves, not with haste, but with certainty. The world often misunderstands women like this, calls them aloof, too quiet, too selective. But what they don't see is the journey that birthed this presence. They don't see the years of noise she had to endure, the heartbreaks she had to heal, the patterns she had to break. Stillness is not her default, it is her choice. A sacred, hard, one choice. And when a woman chooses stillness, she becomes the eye of the storm. She no longer avoids chaos, she transforms it. Her presence soothes without effort, her gaze grounds without words. She has become the medicine she once sought in others. And those who sit in her energy long enough feel it. Something shifts in them too. This is the woman whose beauty deepens with time, whose essence becomes richer, not dimmer, who no longer needs noise to feel alive, because she has found life not in the world's applause, but in the silence of her own soul. A beautiful older woman is not defined by the absence of wrinkles or the shape of her body, but by the presence of wisdom in her silence, depth in her presence, and gentleness in her strength. She has lived long enough to stop performing and start being. Her beauty no longer begs for approval. It radiates from a place within that is rooted, unshaken, and whole. And while the world may be drawn to what glitters, it always returns to what glows quietly from within. This kind of woman does not seek to be the center of every room, but she naturally becomes the calm in the chaos, the grounded one in moments of tension, the light that doesn't flicker in the wind. Her energy is not loud, but it is unforgettable. She loves without losing herself, speaks without needing to overpower, and walks away when peace is no longer possible. Not to punish, but to protect her center. She is not trying to be youthful. She is becoming timeless. Her path is not about appearance. It is about alignment, not about status, but about soul. not about chasing love, but embodying it, first for herself, then for others. In relationships, she doesn't try to convince someone of her worth. Her presence speaks for itself. In solitude, she is not lonely, but filled. And in every stage of life, she reveals that the most powerful kind of beauty is the kind that cannot be taken, dimmed, or denied, because it was never dependent on the outside. The woman who learns to be still, who embraces her story, who honors her values, and who carries herself with grace, this woman becomes the kind of beauty that lingers in memory long after the moment has passed, not because of how she looked, but because of how she made others feel safe, seen, and stirred awake. This is what it truly means to age beautifully, to become a mirror that reflects truth, a presence that restores balance, and a soul that invites others home to themselves. And if you are walking that path now, whether quietly, slowly, or courageously, know this: you are already becoming that kind of woman. The world may not always recognize it, but your energy never lies. And those who are meant for you, who are ready for depth, will feel it. They will stay. They will listen. They will see.